Perfect.
what are you sipping on there?
Just the electrolytes.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice. I saw a thing on your LinkedIn where you said you need 2 coffees before you go on stage. One
Uh,
to make sure
two
words come out,
coffees.
and the other one to make sure it's coherent.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I mean, most days it's 3 coffees, but definitely 2 before hitting the stage. And then recently, I've now transitioned to drinking black coffee because I was just feeling I'm taking in so much milk if I'm doing 3 cappuccinos a day, and like how that accumulates over a week and then a month and then a year. So now I'm trying like black coffee, and this is called a long black. So it's like actually a super
Okay.
small cup, but like a double espresso and then a little bit of hot water. So getting my taste buds used to that.
Do you find that you get a bit edgy after 3 coffees?
I don't know, because I think like for the morning, it's like the perfect uh, kick up the ass to wake up, and then
Yeah.
the third one is sort of in the afternoon, just as you start hitting that slump. Because I mean, by that time, I don't know what time you wake up. I typically do like 5:30 or so. So you've already been awake for 7-8 hours. I think your body is naturally starting to take that bit of a dip, and then
Mm,
the coffee just helps to sort of even you out through that for me, at least.
yeah. So, dude, I've got a gym, so I do personal training and that sort of thing. So depending on the day, I'm up at between 4:15 and 5. 5 would be the absolute latest.
Mm,
So yeah, for me that morning, I tried to do this thing where I was getting a bit edgy, and I tried to think maybe I should do green tea in the morning, like first thing, and try and delay my like caffeine hit for like the first 90 minutes of the day. Brilliant. It just didn't work out. It was just not
didn't work out.
like that, that first session. That first session, I need 1 coffee in me by the start of the first session. Otherwise, because I'm the one that's got to bring the energy, right? They're like dragging their heels, and I was like one eye open. And I'm like, if I'm cruising in there with my green tea vibes, it's not going to work very well. Did you in the Flip? You in the wellness space as a physio, and
Yeah, yeah, I was.
and you know what I find interesting? I have a fascination about people who take like major career changes, because I often wonder, we go down a path, right? And we decide on this path when we're 18 or 19. I mean, what do we know at 18, 19 years old
Mm,
anyway? And and I wonder often how many people in their 50s, 60s, maybe even are now retired, who've made a decision when they were 18 or 19 about what they were going to do, decided that it wasn't for them, but just carried on going just because that was the thing that you needed to do. Or maybe because they had responsibilities and that set their life up accordingly, and now they couldn't actually pivot. But I
mm,
often wonder, what is it? Because it's a difficult decision to make, because there's investment in there, right? It's like, okay, you've studied, you've then done ComServe, or you've done an internship. So like you've invested now in this thing. And how did it feel being a physio that made you decide, hmm, maybe I should go somewhere, another direction?
yeah, I think you're right. So many people go through life having made a decision and then never making another decision that changes that trajectory for them. And I think it gets tough. I was fortunate that I had no dependence in my life. I can imagine once you have a family and you are set up, and all those things become so much harder. But at least in my life, I graduated as a physio in 2007, did my ComServe in 2008. And then initially, my idea was that I would be running out for the Springboks as the physio. Like that was the big plan. It's like sports physio, sports practice. And then life kind of has this way of just guiding you in different directions. Where I ended up was working in intensive care units in hospitals mostly. It's actually just like that's where I was making the most money, to be honest. So that's kind of the path that I just followed. Did that for a long time, then became the head of rehab, head of rehab for step down facility, which mostly dealt with patients sort of post hip and knee replacement. Elderly patients. It was a very monotonous process. Every knee rehab situation is kind of the same as the previous one, and to a certain extent, I enjoyed what I was doing because I enjoyed the people I was working with. And I always enjoyed being of service to these people. But I just kind of grew tired of the same thing over and over, to be frank. And it felt quite monotonous to me. But then I also just started feeling like I need to do something else with my life. I can't tell you that I had a clear vision of the future that said, don't be a physio, be this thing. Like there wasn't that sort of clarity. I just felt an itch that said, I don't feel like this is it. I know, I don't know what the next thing might be, but what I do know is I don't want to be here. And so that kind of sent me on this path of just experimenting with lots of different business ideas. I had a friend who was very much into digital business. So we were trying lots of things. And at the time, the big thing was you build a directory website and people list their businesses on your website and you make a lot of money because they all pay you every single month for that and you don't have to do anything. So I was like, cool, that sounds, like a good idea. And started directory websites, found, I think at the time it's called Upwork now. I think back then it was called Elance, where you can connect to freelancers from across the world. And I was like, cool. I like that idea. Like, how about I built the freelancer website, but for South Africa? So I started hiring developers from overseas. It was just a big mess, to be honest. But I was learning a lot about the digital world, and it kind of opened up a new path for me. But again, I think a big part of that was that I had the means to do so. I had a resource from a resource point of view, from a dependency point of view. It was easy for me just to shift me. I didn't have to shift a lot of other things around me. But I do think that if you are going to make a big career change in your life, it's usually born from a place of not vision, but frustration, and maybe to some level even like irritation. Because I remember towards the end, I was waking up in the morning and I was like, I just don't want to do this. And that became such a driving force in my life that I was like, okay, I need to figure out what the next thing's going to be.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. But at the same time, I think that there's always skills that we acquire over certain periods in our life, right? So you would have developed a certain set of skills that even though you might have decided that part of your career, of your professional life had ended, there, I would imagine, have been skills that you would have learned in that physio trade and that now applied into a leadership a leadership position now where you are in the top 30 global guru leaders for leadership and speakers, and you would have taken lessons from that and applied that into your current life.
Dude, in a big way. Like, I mean, if I strip away the physicality of physiotherapy, in a big way, what you're doing is you are supporting people emotionally through what's a very difficult time for them. And especially in the rehab setting, people were in rehab for between 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a long time. It's a long break away from where you used to be. People are in a lot of pain. It makes them very irritable, makes them depressed. And then on top of that, you also have to deal with like the family dynamics, people coming to visit and people who upset patients. And like we had people fighting about wills, like right in front of, it's like, it was quite hectic. But so I think when I go back to what those moments taught me, it was definitely a lot about the interpersonal skills and how to be empathetic, how to listen well. And actually, you are coaching people through that process the entire time. And it's weird when I reflect back, if I had to go and adjust the physio curriculum, I would actually tell them that you need to teach people business skills because people come out of physio and med school with no business skills at all. And then they are expected to build a business. And two is we actually need to have some sort of coaching curriculum in it because that's like 90% of the game here. To fix the knee and go through the range of motion exercises and the strengthening exercises, like that's the easy part. The much harder part is helping someone to remain focused on the outcome that they're working towards, helping them to remain composed when they are in a lot of pain. So I do think mostly what I've taken from those years has been the ability to hold space for people. And obviously in the work that I do today, that's pretty important. From a one-on-one coaching capacity all the way through to the workshops that I host, even to the keynotes. It's that we create a space where people can process what they are going through. And back then, it was mostly for them to process their way through pain. Whereas today, I think it's mostly to process their way through different frameworks and stories that I present to them that help them to see their lives or their businesses through a new perspective or from a new angle.
Yeah, that's so true, man. And it's spot on. So for me, coming in the gym space, behavior modification, that's the name of the game, right? So you've got somebody
Sure.
who's come to you, they've presented with a problem, and they're like, my lifestyle is not the way that I want it to be. Make some changes. So far, I've been incapable of making those changes on my own. So therefore, I'm going to outsource that area of my life, and I'm going to ask for your help. And then in return, you teach me what to do, and I'll come here and we do the stuff. But there's so much that happens outside of the gym. So if a person comes to train with me 3 times a week, it's a very, very small percentage of the week that I can actually control the decisions that they make. So to get the best results, you have to coach the person so that they can be empowered to make the correct decisions outside of the gym and not work in opposition to you, not intentionally, of course, but unknowingly, and perhaps getting out of habits and that sort of thing. And without question, so people ask me like, how many sets and reps should I do? What advice do you have? What's the best program? I was like, the best rep scheme out of any program that you're ever going to hear is 3 times 52, 3 workouts a week, 52 weeks a year. If you can get that done, like the rest is fluff, man. Like if you can get that, then we can start talking about, okay, right, let's, barring you're a professional sportsman and that kind of thing, like an elite athlete, just a gen pop, want to get in shape. If you can get 3 times 52, you are smoking it. Absolutely smoking it. And then you've got positive momentum, you've got identity shifts, you've got all of that. And I think something that's come out of this baby right here, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Look at that.
Thank
Look
you for
at that. Expansive. And a lot of it comes down to things like identity and sorting out, being self-aware enough to resolve the internal before you expect the external to change, right? How much of that is involved in what you do, trying to get to the internal to then change the external?
Well, I think it's pretty much everything, and I want to take it back to your example that you used, like from a training perspective, because I think you'll agree that most people probably don't need like a highly specialized exercise routine. Like you were saying, 3 times 52. That's sort of like that's what you need to focus on, and within that, for most people, probably a very general program would more or less suffice to get them from where they are to like 2 or 3 steps ahead. Like you're going to focus on the highly specialized things if you're like really into it, like really like bodybuilding or like working around injuries. Like there has to be some sort of nuance to it then, because there's an additional layer. It's not just you going from 0 to 1. So like 0 to 1, like most likely some sort of not generic, but typical program would suffice. And what you find is that the technicalities of the training isn't like the differentiator. Like what's actually more important than the technicality is the emotional component of it. So I use this framework called the math and the drama when I speak about change. And it's actually funny because it relates to a gym story. I was working with a client. So actually, let me quickly preface this. There's a guy called Roald Heifetz who said, when you look at change, there are 2 challenges with it, adaptive and technical challenges. And the adaptive challenge is the sort of internal emotional stuff that we have to go through, whereas the technical challenge is the how to, like, how do we get stuff done? And typically what you'll find is that we try to solve math problems, drama problems using math, and that never works. So, and I'll give you a quick example here. So I had this client who I was working with, and it's in an executive coaching session, but he came to me with like a list, and at the top of it, it says, I want to be more consistent in going to the gym. So I'm like, okay, cool. That sounds like a math issue. Like we can figure this out. And we start talking about it. I ask him, what's the problem? He says, it's time management. So I'm like, okay, cool. Even more clear, math problem. Let's flip open the calendars. We flip open the calendars. We find some dates that work. I say to him, like, what are you going to do in the gym? Because the worst thing is you get to the gym and you have no idea what to do. Like, you just become paralyzed. So we found like something, I think like a pretty like templatized program for him to go and follow, but at least he knew like what to go and do.
Mm-hmm.
We leave the session. About 5 weeks later, we tap back in. I ask him how to go. He says, the first week I went 3 times, exactly like we agreed. The second week I went twice. And then since then, I haven't been back. And I was so gutted because I was like, I thought we figured this out. I thought we solved this issue for you. And now you're telling me that you couldn't keep to the routine that we set. So we speak about it a bit longer. And eventually, like, one of the questions I ask him is, how did you feel when you stepped into the gym? And he sat with it for a bit. And then he said, I felt guilty. And I was like, guilty? Like, that doesn't make sense. Shouldn't you be proud of yourself or happy that you are doing this for yourself? And he said, no, I feel guilty because while I'm at the gym, I'm not pushing my business forward. While I'm at the gym, I'm being unproductive. While I'm at the gym, my people are at the office. And I realized, like, we're not dealing with a math problem. We're dealing with a drama problem. It's an identity issue. And the more we spoke about it, the clearer the picture became, because when he was growing up, he grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. And so after school, he wouldn't go play sports with his friends. He'd go and work in the offices. On weekends, he wouldn't go and watch movies and chill with his friends. He'd go and work in the shops. And so his entire life, his entire identity was built around business and being busy. And the moment he stepped outside of that to do something else, like gym, he felt this discomfort and he couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew that he felt it. And it was enough to drive his behavior. And in this specific instance, it was enough to drive him out of the gym. And you can imagine that he was probably sitting in the gym on his phone all the time, just trying to distract himself from this uncomfortable feeling that he couldn't quite place. And so ultimately we were like, oh, like this is what's happening. Like you have this drama issue. And again, you can't solve drama using math. We try and do that all the time and we fail. Like with him, we could have tried more time management techniques and time blocking and like whatever. We could have done, like, thrown all of it at him. It would have never changed the situation because it would have never addressed the fact that he felt this discomfort when he was going to the gym because his identity didn't allow him to go and do that. And so this is something, by the way, that I think a lot of people are going to face in times to come when it relates to AI and all the changes that we are seeing in the world right now. Because the technicalities is often the easy thing to solve. The math is often the easy thing to solve. Like, we often know how to do something. We know what to do. We just don't do it. And the reason we don't do it is because there's this underlying drama issue that we aren't addressing. And so you have this emotional handbrake that's been pulled up. And if you don't address that, if you don't name it to tame it, then you're going to keep getting stuck in the same loop and you're not going to be able to figure it out because you'll throw more how-tos and more tutorials at it and it's not going to solve the problem. And you'll grow more and more frustrated with your inability to make changes in your life.
Yeah, that is so spot on, man. It's quite remarkable, actually, that how much of a role that actually plays. I suppose it comes down to a large extent to self-awareness, and being able to understand oneself and really prioritizing understanding how Clinton works. What does Clinton do? How does he think about these things? And then at the same time, and then figuring out, okay, how does one overcome it? So being able to identify it, I suppose, would be phase one, and then a plan can be put in place thereafter. How did that finish with that guy, by the way? Did you guys manage to make some changes, and did he get into the gym?
No, great question, because we had the realization that this was like this drama issue. I found this psychologist who said, we are all driven by subconscious emotions and we don't even realize it. And the only way to deal with that subconscious emotion is that you have to take it from the subconscious into the conscious part of the brain. And then once it's there, now you can be more sort of reasonable. You can debate with it. You can be a bit more logical because you can think your way through this emotion now. So he said, you have to name it to tame it. That was, like, he said all of his research can be summarized into that one phrase. And so for him, that's essentially what it's not a magic bullet, right? It's not like you name it and now you've solved it. It was that he named it. He knew, oh, it's the guilt. That's what's driving me out of the gym. And when he went to the gym now, he wasn't just training his biceps and quads and back, but he was also retraining a new identity. So it meant going back to the gym, but then sitting with that discomfort, but knowing what it is so it doesn't regulate your behavior. And then, so we had that entire conversation. We did like 1 or 2 more sessions, and then it was COVID and we lost touch. And then halfway through last year, he rehired me as his coach. And these days, all of our sessions happen at 8 a.m. after he's been to the gym at 7 a.m. So he's completely rewired that
Awesome.
identity. Yeah, no, he's done a phenomenal job. And he's created an identity that makes space for other things that are important outside of just business. So it's
Man, that
funny
is
because
so
I told the
cool.
story as part of my keynote for a long time. I didn't actually know the outputs. Like I didn't know what happened to him specifically, but now I know. So I'm quite happy to be able to like go full circle on the story.
I mean, that's so cool, man. And I suppose that's why any of us do what we do. You know, as
Yeah, for
coaches,
sure.
you want to be able to play a role in maybe shifting somebody's perspective or perception on how they view themselves or how they view the world, and then that triggers
Mm,
some kind of change in a constructive way that then drives their life and changes the course of their life in a positive
yeah.
direction. If I look at some of these things in your book, along with John, there's a couple of things that I'll read out here. You spoke about a workaholics culture, maximum speed versus sustainable pace. Mediocrity is always in a rush, which was a quote that you used from somebody else. And then deliberate reps and power moves. All of these themes and things that you brought up in the book, they really speak a lot about self-awareness and having an understanding of where am I at this current point in time? You know, how am I oriented in relation to everything
Mm,
else in this world and my immediate environment? Am I, working for the sake of working? Or am I working at the expense of my health? What is the opportunity cost of this work that's happening all the time? Um, where are my responsibilities? Because there's also a responsibility to oneself. How hard does one work? You know, like that workaholics culture flip that like blew my mind. And then that mediocrity is always in a rush quote that knocked my socks
so
off
good.
because oh man, because I thought of myself with that. I was like, good gracious, I'm always in a bloody rush. And, and, and yeah, and it's like those sorts of things, like they hit you square when you can feel like something's shifted you. It's like a shock, isn't it?
Mm,
Oh wow, that one hits home, and it makes you question things and think about the way that you do things. And I mean, that's one of the main things that I've taken away from the book is that it has questioned the way that I do things, approach things, how I want to expand my horizons. Can you speak to me a little bit about that? About having, let's chat about maximum speed versus a sustainable pace, because I think that is a big thing in today's society.
mm. I want to just quickly touch on self awareness, as you mentioned it, because I think that it is the biggest determining factor of like how you're going to succeed in 2026 and beyond. It's always been really important, but I feel like with the pace of change that we're experiencing right now, it's even more important. And even if we just use the math and the drama we spoke about before, the quicker you are able to unravel the drama, the more effective you become in dealing with the math. Because I honestly believe that for most of us, we have the brain power and the cognitive skills to figure things out. And especially if you think of artificial intelligence being able to augment that for you, being able to augment your ability to think through things and find different perspectives and brainstorm. So it's not like the cognitive horsepower that's the issue. It is your ability to understand your own triggers, to be able to unravel those triggers, and to move more effortlessly and more elegantly into what your future might look like. But the longer that you don't deal with those things, the longer you stay tethered to the past and you stay tethered to the things that created those triggers in the first place. when I think of self-awareness, there's a model that comes to mind for me. And it's a model that I use for every workshop that I run. It's like the main feature of my keynote at the moment. And it's called the art of recalibration. And it actually, we can even touch on maximum speed versus sustained pace through the lens of this model. So I came across this model in the form of like aviation. It's called the 1 in 60 rule. And you've probably come across a version of this before. It says that when a plane takes off, it's always heading in a very specific direction, obviously, because it needs to get to a specific destination. But if that plane had to veer off course by just 1 degree, then by the time it's traveled 60 miles, it'll be 1 mile away from its intended destination. And so obviously the further it goes, the further off course it goes, the further away from its intended target it is. And it's just this very simple model that says an almost imperceptible deviation from your intended course, if not corrected, over time takes you very far away from where you want it to be. And I've run these sort of simulations with ChatGPT and Claude, and I've asked, if you take off in Joburg and you are heading to Cape Town and your plane goes off course by just 1 degree from the time you take off, by how far do you miss the runway? And it turns out you miss the runway by like 25 kilometers. And it's insane to think when it's just a 1 degree shift. That's all, 1 degree shift. And you miss your runway by 25 kilometers. And so if you think about it, we usually have a target that we are working towards. We usually start the year and we set these goals for ourselves. But then it's so easy for us to start drifting. It's so easy for us to start going off course. And we go off course for many reasons. It could be internal because we don't have the awareness to know that we are drifting. We get shiny object syndrome. We get distracted. We get bored. There's so many things that could happen. But then also the world around us obviously is changing all the time. And things just happen to us. And so we might start drifting. And the challenge is that initially when you drift, that 1 degree drift, like you don't even recognize it's there because it's almost imperceptible. And I think you've probably seen this in practice often that, someone might like skip a session and then like it's not a big deal, but then they skip another session. And then almost like it almost takes like 3 skipped sessions for that to become a new routine or a new habit. And then like you're on your path, then you're just drifting, So it's crazy how quickly that can happen. And then the recalibration part is that, so we have the destination that we are working towards, we have the drift that we are experiencing, and then our ability to then course correct, bring our actions and our thinking back into alignment with what we are trying to achieve. That is the recalibration part. That's the change part. And the question that I always tell people to ask isn't, will I drift? Because you will drift. Like, you are human and things happen to you. The question is, for how long will you drift? Because the quicker we can recalibrate, the better. And that is where self-awareness becomes crucial. Because if you're a very self-aware person, and if you have external tools that maybe help you to benchmark or track where you are and what you're doing, then you can know, I'm going off course. I need to recalibrate. I need to bring myself back into alignment. Whereas if you don't have that, then like the drift's like most potent weapon is its invisibility. Like you don't even realize it. You get so pulled into it that you don't realize you're drifting. And of course, like you'll drift and you'll drift and you'll drift until one day you hit catastrophe. And then you have to recalibrate. And then to recalibrate then becomes a huge issue because you've let yourself go to the point of, oh, now I have to have a huge intervention to bring myself back into alignment with like who I want to be or where I want to go. So I find it to be a highly useful model to use when thinking of self-awareness, but also just when you're using it to think of goal attainment and creating the life that we want to live or creating the business that we want to have.
Agreed, dude. I agree.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there if I can touch on.
Go for it.
There's a wonderful quote that I read, and it was in the sphere of self-improvement. And it was, if you want to change your life, fix the things you do every day. So don't try to have these big, massive plans. Like I'm going to flip and change climate change, or I'm going to do whatever. That all starts by looking at your life and being, what are the things that I can fix today? and what are the things that I do every day, because those decisions you do every day ultimately leads to where you're going to end up, whether or not you're on the runway or whether or not you're 25 kilometers off the runway. And then
Yeah.
secondly, what you're speaking about there is, what comes to mind there is to me is resilience. So resilience could be two things. It can be, how long can you endure something for? So have this thing happen all the time, and then you continue to just endure it, sometimes often involuntarily. But the second thing, aspect to resilience, is how quickly can you course correct? So how quickly can you get back to baseline? It would be another avenue of resilience, in my opinion. And I think that's what you're alluding to is, okay, so we're not being resilient in the sense that we are enduring these things that are happening over a long period of time. We are being resilient in the sense that we're able to identify and course correct quite quickly, and then therefore get back to baseline regularly. So I think that's major, man. Absolutely, absolutely major.
And only according to research, only about 14% of people, 1/4, have a high level of self-awareness. And initially, when I read that stat, I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, I mean, 14%. And I've always considered myself to be someone with a lot of self-awareness. And I still think I have a lot of self-awareness, but I realized that even with me practicing that all the time, I actually still feel like I have a low level of self-awareness, to be honest, because I'm continuously discovering so many things that I didn't realize. Like, oh, geez, like you talk about this, but look at what look at your action over here, or like, oh, like you didn't even realize that you've been dragging this thing with you for so long. It's like last year. So one of my big themes for the year is talking about power moves, and it was born out of like almost a year of not having the awareness until I had the awareness. And so, I mean, we could argue like, what is a high level of self-awareness really? And like, what qualifies you to be part of the 14% or not? But I think it's like, there's always just so much to uncover. And if you are reactively living your life all the time, just trying to get through the day and not really creating the space, the white space to slow down and reflect, and to be curious and be asking the questions about why you do what you do, then I think, like I don't know how you actually move through the world effectively.
Yeah,
So
you don't.
yeah, I think it's very tough. So people shouldn't even aspire to high levels of self-awareness. I think just having self-awareness as a starting point, like just having a practice for self-awareness or the space for self-awareness, that's a good starting point. Like just at least have something in your life that gives you a bit of perspective and reflection.
Yeah. I think a part of that also is knowing what you don't know, right? I think that's also a massive part of self-awareness.
But how do you know that? Because if you don't know it, by definition, you don't know it. So how do you know what you don't know?
So, for example, I had a forensic pathologist on the show, and he'd been, man, he's like won awards, and he's been in forensic pathology for a very, very long time. And with respect to making a diagnosis and a cause of death and that sort of thing, the more experienced the forensic pathologists, the more acutely they were aware of what they didn't know about what happened to this person. So therefore, they were less likely to jump to a certain diagnosis. Whereas your
No, I
young,
understand what you mean.
yeah. So your young
Just the awareness of
forensic pathologist,
your gap. Yes, cool.
yes, exactly. Being aware of
Got
that
you.
gap, that knowledge gap, right,
Got you.
is a powerful thing. So the youngsters were quite quick to be like, oh, I know this guy, time of death this time, cause of death this time, and very often they would get it wrong. So yeah, that's the context that I'm referring to. But I think that also, because you're constantly questioning whether or not you're self-aware, that also in its own sense is a form of self-awareness, right?
For sure, that is.
Yeah. So I mean, I reckon you're probably part of the 14%, but um, it's crucial. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't speak to that. Like, and speaking about your word, power moves, that's something that's come up quite a lot in my research on you, but also you guys do a thing where you have your word for the year. And you were reflecting on that at the end of last year, on your word from last year, 2025. And you said to John in that particular episode that you felt that you hadn't necessarily done it enough service. And I felt like that was something that was quite relatable, because there's a lot of people that start out with something with the best of intentions, and maybe also they do a good job with it, but maybe that they're overly critical of themselves. So speak to me a little bit about that as you reflect on that, and your word for the year last year, firstly, and then the sort of the line of thinking as to whether or not you were successful on that.
Yeah, so we have this practice of, like, at the start of every year we set a word, and that word becomes your intention for the year. It becomes how you gauge whether you've been successful in a certain way, and it definitely becomes a filter for decision making and for how you behave. So my word for last year was magic. And when I set out with the course, like with the word, it was magic in big ways. Like, that was my intention with it, is I want to have like magical experiences, and I want to look back at the year and go like, geez, that was magic, the way it just kind of turned out. And then we got to the end of the year, and I felt like I didn't really see that, to be honest. It felt like it was a year pretty much like any other year. And in the session, so obviously for me, it was a bit of a frustration, because like we go through the effort of choosing the word, you have the intention, but you also have the expectation of what that word's going to deliver, because now you have it in your mind. Like, now you're working towards this thing. And then you get there, and like it didn't quite live. You didn't quite live up to the expectation of that word. So in the session, John was kind of reframing it for me, and he said, well, it's really about magic in the small moments. And I appreciated it, because it was a good lens to use for looking at the year. And yes, I did see the magic in the small moments, but I still felt a bit disappointed, because it still felt to me like I didn't live into the word, into the way that I wanted to live into it. But I think I've always been very critical of myself in every aspect. And so even when we have a word like magic, I think he's more, what's what I'm looking for here? He's more accepting of things. So he's able to take that and just kind of roll with it. Whereas, like, because I had a very clear picture, there's a pass or fail for me and where that was achieved.
Yes.
And to be
It's very
honest,
binary.
it's very binary. And to be honest, like this year, I think it's the same thing. So my word this year is power move. And it was born out of the frustration of last year. So last year, I didn't get to see the magic. My diagnosis of that is that the reason I didn't get to see the magic is because I was so caught up in doing the same things over and over and over. I was so bought into incrementalism and accretion and focusing on small improvements that became the only way that I could see myself achieving my goals. And I realized in going through this last year that if you only focus on incrementalism, so like be 1% better every day, if you only focus on that, it can take you a far way, but I don't think it can take you all the way. I think it's half of the picture of success. And the other half of that picture is that we have to also be making power moves, that we also have to be doing things that are new, different, and discontinuous from the past. Because one of the core features of incrementalism and accretion and your rituals, habits, and routines is that I can look at what you are doing today and very well predict what's going to happen next week and the week after that and the week after that, what it's going to look like in your life. So I know what your life is going to look like based on your rituals, habits, and routines. Obviously, like that is the feature of it. But when you make a power move, you are doing something that is new, different, discontinuous, meaning that it opens up new pathways, new realities, gives you new potentials. Like, you don't know where this might take you. And I realized last year that's exactly what I didn't have, is that I was so focused on rituals, habits, and routines. You could be looking out from the outside into my life, and you would have gone, Erik is doing all the right things. Geez, like he's accumulating the right kind of actions, decisions. He's being consistent. And like all that consistency, it felt like it almost led me nowhere. And I know that there was benefit from it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on discipline and consistency. Like, those things are really important. All I'm saying is that it's incomplete. that one way of achieving our goals is through the lens of accumulation, that we get there through a tipping point. But another lens is that there are certain things you can do that's a more direct path towards that goal, a more direct step or intentional step towards that goal. And it's something that requires you to step out of the groove you've created because of your rituals, habits, and routines. It requires a new way of thinking, a different way of thinking. It requires that you break from the patterns of the past. And so when I saw that, I was like, of course, like that's what my life was missing last year was, yes, I have the consistency locked down. I wasn't taking enough new risk. I wasn't trying to do enough new big things. And so once I had that aha moment, I was like, okay, cool. Now I have a new lens through which I can see the attainment of my goals. And my word for the year is power moves. And again, very binary. Like I know whether I can sit down, I can go, Q1, did you make any power moves? And then evaluate myself through that lens. My power move for Q1 was going to be to go spend about 2 weeks in Dubai to speak there and network there. And then literally the day that I was supposed to fly was the day that Emirates shut down their flights for the first time.
Yeah.
So Q1 power move is not in the books, but it's been a highly powerful lens for me to look through. And again, that's my word for the year.
Dude, if I can bring it back full circle before we close off for today, how long ago did you give up physiotherapy?
2017, end of 2017.
End of 2017. So it sounds to me like end of 2017, early 2018, that was the start of your big power moves. Because
Definitely.
that in itself is a
Huge
power move. Yeah,
Definitely.
big time. Like changing course. This is not for me. Going somewhere else. Don't know where I'm headed exactly, but power move time. Let's see where it goes. Copy pasting a bit of that into 2026 will serve you well. Yeah, let's go, man. Dude, where can people find you if I can direct them to any of your awesome content if they want to make use of your services?
erikkruger.com. You'll put that into Google. You'll find Instagram, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, dude, I hope you have an awesome year filled with power moves.
Thanks to you.
And
and you too, bro.
Yeah. I suppose the intention behind it's the main thing, right? You'll get to Dubai, but you can at least when you wrap up Q1, you can think, yeah, you did all the right things, and it just wasn't meant to be right now. But
for sure,
I think that's where the success lies. The frustration comes in when you don't make those moves, and you think, oh, I wish I did it.
Constant recalibration. That's the way I see it.
Nice, man. Thanks so much, Erik. Dude, take it easy, man.
Thanks to you. Yeah, thanks to you, man.
Hey everyone. A huge amount of work and effort goes into producing this podcast, whether it's from the research going into the episode, whether it's finding the guests coming to the location or them being online, to producing the content, edited and putting it in a format that is conducive to your ears and your eyes. And it goes a really, really long way if you can just do me one thing in return for this free content: share it. Share it far and wide, and if you find an episode useful, send it to someone who might feel the same way. That's all. Thanks a million. See you next week.